The rhythm of daily life within the Palais-Royal unfolded with a steady, almost imperceptible consistency, guided more by habit than intention. Mornings arrived quietly, not announced by bells or commands, but by gradual changes in light and sound that seeped through the building. The palace itself seemed to awaken slowly, stone holding the night's coolness while air shifted subtly as doors opened and closed. Servants moved through corridors with practiced ease, their routines shaped by repetition rather than urgency, each step placed with care to avoid unnecessary noise. Nothing rushed forward and nothing lagged behind, creating a sense of balance that defined the pace of the day. Clothing was prepared and arranged in an orderly sequence, fabrics laid out in advance so that each choice followed naturally from the last. Silks, velvets, and linens were handled gently, their textures familiar to the touch. Dressing became less an act of presentation and more a continuation of routine, one garment layered over another with unspoken understanding. The act took time, but not because it was difficult, rather because there was no need to hurry. Each moment expanded slightly, allowing attention to settle on small details like the weight of fabric or the sound of cloth brushing against wood. Meals followed a similar pattern of calm predictability. Tables were set quietly, dishes placed with precision, and food served at a measured pace. The sounds of eating were soft and unremarkable, blending easily with the ambient quiet of the surrounding rooms. Conversation, when it occurred, was subdued and unforced, filling space without demanding it. Silence was never uncomfortable, only another layer in the steady flow of the day. Time was marked not by clocks, but by these repeated actions, each one signaling a transition without breaking the rhythm. Throughout the day, movement within the palace remained gentle and contained. Walks through corridors or galleries were unhurried, footsteps echoing faintly against stone and wood. Encounters with others happened naturally, guided by proximity rather than schedule. Greetings were brief, exchanges limited to what was necessary, and departures unremarkable. The emphasis remained on continuity, on maintaining the quiet order that allowed each person to move through their tasks without disruption. Afternoons stretched out softly, light shifting gradually across floors and walls. The passing hours were felt in the lengthening of shadows and the subtle cooling of rooms rather than any external signal. Activities adjusted accordingly, with people settling into chairs, reading, or simply observing the slow movement of light. There was no clear boundary between one hour and the next, only a gentle progression that carried the day forward. Evening approached in the same unassuming manner, its arrival marked by the lighting of candles and the softening of sounds beyond the palace walls. Routines adjusted but did not change, maintaining their familiar structure. The day concluded as it had begun, not with a sense of completion, but with continuation, each action reinforcing the calm, ordered rhythm that defined life within these walls, a rhythm that persisted quietly, evenly, and without interruption. Interior spaces within the Palais-Royal shaped experience through texture and light more than through scale or ornament. Stone walls carried a constant coolness, their surfaces smooth in some places and worn in others, absorbing sound and reflecting it back softly. Wooden floors bore the marks of long use, each plank responding faintly underfoot, producing low, familiar creaks that blended into the background. Rugs and tapestries softened these sounds further, their woven fibers dulling echoes and adding layers of quiet warmth to rooms that might otherwise feel empty or stark. Light entered the palace gradually and unevenly, filtered through tall windows and heavy drapery that muted brightness and softened contrast. Morning illumination was pale and diffused, spreading gently across floors and furniture without sharp edges. As the day progressed, light shifted slowly, sliding along walls and catching on the folds of fabric or the polished surfaces of tables. Shadows formed and dissolved without urgency, their movements subtle enough to be felt rather than seen, guiding attention quietly through the space. Fabrics played a central role in defining the atmosphere. Curtains, upholstery, and clothing introduced softness into rooms dominated by stone and wood. Velvets absorbed light, appearing deeper and darker in low illumination, while silks reflected it faintly, adding gentle highlights that changed with movement. The rustle of fabric accompanied every gesture, creating a consistent, calming sound that reinforced the sense of enclosure. These materials also influenced temperature, holding warmth close to the body and softening the chill that lingered in the air. Furniture was arranged with familiarity rather than display in mind. Chairs, tables, and cabinets occupied their places as they always had, their positions reinforcing predictable paths through rooms. Surfaces bore the subtle marks of use, edges smoothed by repeated contact, corners softened by time. Objects were left where they were needed, creating an environment that responded naturally to daily routines without requiring thought or adjustment. This quiet order allowed movement to remain fluid and unforced. Sound traveled gently through these interiors, shaped by walls, ceilings, and textiles. Voices carried only a short distance before dissolving into stillness, encouraging soft speech and measured tones. Footsteps, the turning of pages, the clink of porcelain, and the crackle of fire blended into a layered soundscape that never overwhelmed. Each noise lingered briefly before fading, leaving behind a sense of continuity rather than interruption. The air within these rooms held subtle scents that shifted with activity and time. Wax from candles, smoke from hearths, the faint perfume of fabrics, and the neutral presence of stone combined into a stable, familiar mixture. Changes were gradual, almost imperceptible, reinforcing the feeling that space itself was steady and reliable. Breathing slowed naturally in this environment, influenced by the absence of sharp stimuli and the predictability of surroundings. As light diminished toward evening, interiors grew more intimate. Candles and fires created small pools of warmth and illumination, drawing attention inward. Shadows deepened but remained soft, their edges blurred by flickering flames. The sense of space contracted slightly, encouraging stillness and rest. Within these walls, texture and light continued to guide perception gently, shaping mood and awareness through subtle, consistent cues that supported calm, reflection, and the slow passage of time. Social life within the palace unfolded quietly, shaped by habit and expectation rather than spectacle. Interactions were frequent but subdued, filling the day with presence without urgency. Courtiers moved in and out of rooms at a measured pace, their arrivals and departures blending seamlessly into the ongoing rhythm of the household. Greetings were exchanged softly, often accompanied by slight gestures rather than words, allowing encounters to remain brief and unobtrusive. These small moments of connection accumulated gently, marking time without drawing attention to themselves. Conversations tended toward the practical and the familiar. Topics rarely strayed beyond daily arrangements, minor social observations, or the condition of the weather. Such exchanges required little emotional investment, serving instead to maintain continuity and order. Voices remained low, shaped by the acoustics of stone and fabric, ensuring that words did not travel far. Pauses in conversation were common and unremarkable, creating space for silence to coexist comfortably alongside speech. Gatherings occurred without formality or anticipation. A few individuals might share a room for a time, seated near a fire or window, their presence acknowledged but not emphasized. The sound of clothing shifting, chairs adjusting, and pages turning often replaced dialogue entirely. These shared spaces allowed for companionship without obligation, reinforcing a sense of quiet community that did not demand constant engagement. People came and went according to personal rhythm rather than schedule, contributing to an atmosphere of ease. The routines of the court provided structure without tension. Tasks were understood, roles were familiar, and expectations remained consistent. This predictability reduced the need for instruction or oversight, allowing interactions to remain smooth and understated. Even disagreements, when they arose, were managed through avoidance or brief exchanges rather than confrontation, preserving the overall calm of the environment. The emphasis remained on maintaining balance rather than asserting individuality. Time spent in company often mirrored time spent alone. Reading, writing, or simple observation occurred in shared spaces without interruption. The presence of others was felt through subtle cues, a shadow crossing the floor, the faint sound of breathing, the gentle movement of air, rather than through direct interaction. This coexistence fostered a collective stillness where awareness extended outward without requiring response. As hours passed, these social patterns repeated with little variation. The same faces appeared, exchanged quiet words, and moved on. The predictability of these interactions reinforced a sense of stability, allowing attention to drift without concern. Relationships were maintained through consistency rather than intensity, their strength lying in repetition and familiarity. Even larger events were absorbed into this subdued rhythm. Announcements, visits, or changes in routine were introduced gradually, their impact softened by the surrounding calm. The palace absorbed these moments as it did all others, allowing them to pass without disruption. Social life thus became another layer of the environment, steady and unremarkable, contributing to the overall sense of continuity and gentle progression that defined daily existence within the palace. The passage of time within the palace revealed itself through subtle shifts rather than clear markers, unfolding gently as light and weather altered the character of each space. Morning brightness entered slowly, filtered through fabric and glass, casting pale reflections that moved gradually across floors and walls. As hours passed, the angle of light changed almost imperceptibly, shadows lengthening and softening without drawing attention. These visual cues provided a quiet structure to the day, allowing awareness of time to emerge naturally rather than through deliberate observation. Weather influenced the interior atmosphere in understated ways. Rain muted the sounds from outside, wrapping the palace in a softened hush as droplets tapped steadily against windows and stone. Clear days brought a faint increase in light, while overcast skies maintained an even subdued tone throughout rooms. Seasonal shifts were felt through temperature and air quality more than sight, the chill of winter lingering longer in stone, and the warmth of summer seeping in gradually. These changes were accepted without comment, folded seamlessly into daily routines. Domestic rituals repeated with comforting regularity. Meals, walks, moments of rest, and quiet tasks followed one another in familiar sequences, each action signaling a gentle transition rather than a firm boundary. The lighting of candles in the evening, the tending of fires, and the preparation of bedding occurred at roughly the same time each day, reinforcing a sense of continuity. These rituals required little thought, their repetition providing stability and easing the perception of time's passage. Minor adjustments marked the flow of hours. Chairs were drawn closer to warmth as light faded. Windows were covered or uncovered in response to temperature, and clothing layers shifted subtly. These small actions reflected an ongoing dialogue with the environment, a constant, quiet calibration that aligned human activity with external conditions. Each adjustment was brief and unremarkable, yet together they formed a steady rhythm that carried the day forward. The palace itself responded to time in its own ways. Wood expanded and contracted with temperature changes, producing faint sounds that signaled cooling or warming. Stone retained heat or cold, influencing how spaces felt at different times of day. These material responses became familiar, their presence woven into the background awareness of those who lived within the walls. They served as additional markers of time, sensed rather than consciously noted. Evenings arrived gradually, defined by the deepening of shadows and the soft glow of artificial light. Sounds from the surrounding city shifted, growing quieter or more distant, while interior sounds became more pronounced. The sense of enclosure increased, drawing attention inward and encouraging stillness. Night did not interrupt the day, but extended it. Its arrival absorbed gently into the existing rhythm. Days blended into one another through this continuous pattern of light, weather, and ritual. No single moment stood apart. Instead, time flowed as a smooth, unbroken sequence. Awareness moved with it, guided by repetition and subtle change, creating a lived experience where the hours passed quietly, supported by the steady interplay of environment and habit, continuing forward in the same measured way, shaped by the slow turning of light and the familiar cadence of daily life. Sound within the palace formed a continuous, gentle presence that shaped awareness without demanding attention. It lingered softly in every room, carried by stone walls and softened by layers of fabric. Footsteps moved through corridors with a muted echo, their rhythm steady and predictable. The distance between steps and the way they faded into silence became familiar, creating a sense of orientation and calm. Even in moments of stillness, the absence of sound was never complete, as the building itself contributed its own quiet signals. Fabric played an important role in shaping the acoustic environment. The rustle of clothing accompanied nearly every movement, a soft whisper that blended seamlessly with the surroundings. Curtains shifted gently as air moved, tapestries absorbed echoes, and rugs dulled the impact of footsteps. These subtle sounds created a consistent background texture, reinforcing the sense of enclosure and intimacy. No single noise dominated. Instead, each contributed modestly to a layered soundscape. Fire provided one of the most constant auditory elements. Hearths crackled quietly, embers shifting and settling with soft pops that punctuated the air at irregular intervals. The sound was steady enough to be comforting, yet varied enough to remain gently engaging. It marked time in an indirect way, its presence reminding listeners of warmth and continuity. Smoke rising through chimneys occasionally produced faint drafts or sighs, adding to the ambient rhythm. Beyond the walls, distant city noises filtered in, softened by distance and architecture. The faint rumble of carts, the muted call of voices, or the distant ringing of bells arrived as gentle vibrations rather than distinct sounds. These external cues connected the interior to the wider world without intruding upon its calm. Weather altered these sounds further, rain muffling them into near silence, clear air allowing them to drift faintly through windows. Human voices were used sparingly and thoughtfully. Conversations were conducted in low tones, shaped by an awareness of space and acoustics. Words carried only a short distance before dissolving, encouraging measured speech and frequent pauses. Silence was treated as a natural companion rather than an absence, allowing listening to become as important as speaking. In shared spaces, this balance created an atmosphere of collective calm. Smaller sounds filled the gaps between more noticeable ones. The turning of pages, the gentle clink of porcelain, the soft scrape of a chair against the floor all appeared briefly before fading. These noises marked moments of activity without disrupting the overall stillness. Each sound was absorbed into the broader pattern, contributing to a sense of continuity rather than interruption. As night approached, the soundscape shifted subtly. Exterior noises diminished, while interior sounds became more pronounced in the quieter air. The crackle of fire, the creak of wood, and the slow rhythm of breathing gained prominence. The palace seemed to listen to itself, its inhabitants attuned to the smallest cues. This heightened awareness did not produce tension but rather deepened the sense of calm, as familiar sounds repeated and blended into one another, forming a steady, reassuring backdrop that carried on through the hours, maintaining its gentle presence as time moved forward in quiet continuity. Life within the palace unfolded through repetition and continuity, shaped by an environment that encouraged steadiness rather than change. Days followed familiar patterns, each one resembling the last closely enough that distinctions softened over time. Morning light returned to the same walls, touched the same fabrics, and revealed the same arrangements of furniture. Movements repeated themselves with little variation, creating a sense that life flowed forward smoothly, without sharp turns or interruptions. This consistency allowed the mind to rest within routine, finding comfort in predictability. The surroundings reinforced this continuity at every moment. Stone walls remained constant, their cool presence unchanged by passing hours. Corridors stretched in the same directions, offering the same gentle echoes with each footstep. Windows framed the same views of sky and city, altered only slightly by weather or season. These stable elements provided an anchor, grounding experience in place and texture, rather than event. Over time, awareness shifted from what happened to how it felt to move through these spaces again and again. Repetition shaped behavior naturally. Tasks were performed almost without conscious thought, guided by memory and habit. Hands reached for familiar objects, bodies followed known paths, and movements unfolded smoothly, as though the environment itself directed them. This reduced the need for decision or effort, allowing actions to blend seamlessly into one another. The result was a gentle flow of activity that neither accelerated nor stalled, maintaining a steady pace throughout the day. Human presence added to this sense of continuity without disrupting it. Faces appeared regularly, their expressions familiar, their voices recognizable even when words were not exchanged. Encounters occurred at expected moments, brief and unremarkable, reinforcing social stability. Relationships were maintained through repeated proximity rather than intense interaction, their strength lying in consistency. Over time, this created a shared rhythm where individual lives moved in parallel without conflict or urgency. The passage of days became almost cyclical. Seasonal changes introduced subtle variations in light, temperature, and sound, but these shifts unfolded gradually, absorbed into existing routines. Heavier fabrics replaced lighter ones, fires burned longer, and daylight lingered for different lengths of time. Yet the structure of daily life remained intact. These changes were noted without emphasis, integrated smoothly into the ongoing pattern rather than marking clear transitions. Even memory functioned differently within this continuity. Instead of standing out as distinct moments, experiences blended together, forming a collective sense of time rather than a sequence of events. The past felt close and familiar, not distant or dramatic. This softened perception allowed attention to remain in the present, focused on immediate sensations and surroundings, rather than anticipation or reflection. Within this environment, life unfolded gently, supported by repetition and stability. The absence of sharp contrasts or disruptions allowed days to merge quietly, one into the next. Awareness moved with this flow, guided by the steady presence of space, sound, and routine. The rhythm persisted without needing reinforcement, carrying experience forward in a calm, unbroken progression, where continuity itself became the defining feature, extending onward through familiar patterns, subtle changes, and the enduring presence of place and habit, repeating softly, steadily, and without pause.